Welcome to today's Seidokan Saturday. So, we sort of finished up on the beginner level of Ippon Kumite. Now we want to distinguish between Ippon Kumite, which again is the generic term for any one-step attack, and we looked at it using Kihon, or basic techniques, at the beginner level. Today, more on Yakusoku, which, as I explained last time, Yakusoku means promise or prearranged. So in Yakusoku Kumite, we have a set technique that we're going to do. It's not spontaneous, it's an actual prearranged, pre-established technique that pretty much all systems use. If you're doing judo, you'll practice the basic. You grab here, you turn your hip there, you throw this way. If you're doing wrestling, we do our entry, we do a single leg, we do a double leg, we do a single leg inside, we do a single leg outside, then we work on the specific techniques. In boxing, we work just the jab. We work the jab cross combination. We work just the cross. We work just keeping the hands up. We work working with the feet. Everything starts from a basic single technique sort of approach. So Yakusoku, or promise fighting, is a system or an organization's way of teaching specific set techniques that contain within them certain principles. So at the beginner level, and again, I started this whole series starting with basic concepts and moving up, so I anticipate down the road, as my students that I currently have just started become more advanced, that I'll be giving more advanced material, but it still will all tie back to the same basic principles. But you'll be learning or seeing the more advanced techniques as we progress. But for today, Yakusoku, prearranged fighting. In Seidokan, we have what's called the basic 11. Most of them come with straight in frontal attacks, straight chest punch, face punch, or a front kick. Those can then be extrapolated to other situations, because once you learn the concept of that technique, you can then move beyond that technique onto the next things. So Seidokan, Yakusoku, Ichiban, or number one, is basically one of our, similar to our Ippon Kumite Kihon. The attack comes in, we step back to a square stance. This takes my body offline from the punch. So imagine the punch coming around at me this way or straight in at me here. My body's going to go back at a 45-degree angle as I step to the square stance. And if you're watching behind me, you can see the line straight behind me, so that as I step, you can now see that I'm off of that attack line. We do a block, inside-out block, uchiuke, ude uchiuke. Then, using the loaded leg, we pivot, driving our hip forward and punching. So as you can see, it's really the basic Kihon Ippon Kumite that we already did, but a set technique. So what are we learning from this technique? Typically, if I come here and the guy's attacked with his right hand, that means his left hand over here is still live. So if I block over here, I'm actually on the side of his live hand. So why would I want to be here? Well, because most, I want to call them street punches, most random punches are more circular in nature. And I can't go to the other side with the circle quite as effectively without creating more distance to dodge, deflect, or whatever. This allows me to intercept force with force and return linear force directly at him. So it's basically the most fundamental level. Here comes a guy, I stop him technique. We block, we shift and punch. Seidokan number one. Now in the Kempo that I previously mentioned last week and previously studied before moving to the Okinawan arts, we had a similar concept but using the leg. So the first technique taught in our Kempo system was called Kempo number 6. They didn't teach them numerically in order because they were more complex. Anyway, without getting into teaching methodology, Kempo 6 was essentially the same thing. As the attack came in, we perform a front kick straight at the guy. We meet his force with my force. The arm of his can reach this far, my leg can reach farther. So as the attack comes, front kick, then we cover step and move back again at a 45-degree angle, which puts me directly sideways, limited target. So if I'm facing you here, you can see very limited target acquisition. Same thing, 45 degrees to my opponent in my horse stance, side horse fighting position. So that would be Kempo number 6. So either Kempo or Seidokan, both were teaching the same basic concept, which is direct force to direct force. Not just the technique itself, but the principle involved in that. The second technique in both systems, Seidokan Niban number 2, is I move off to the side, deflect the punch, and this would work for your circular punch, deflecting, and then I turn sideways and punch to the short ribs. Okay? Again, Seidokan number 2, Niban, that would be our second level technique. Similarly, in the Kempo system, and again, drawing the corollary, we would do what's called Kempo number 7, or combination 7, or defensive maneuver 7, or whatever terminology your Kempo school is using these days. We step to the side, but again, just like with Kempo 6, we use the kick because it's longer than the arm. Side, Hyokogere Keage, side step, cover over into your side horse stance. So you can see that in both ways, they encompass a similar technique. So if I'm teaching, as I am now, Seidokan, and I learn, hey, step off to the side is good for deflecting a punch or getting out of the line of the attack, then I can step to the side and kick, just as I can step to the side and punch. If being straight on force to force works with a punch, hey, I can apply that to a kick. And so we're taking a set technique and extrapolating from that a combative principle that can then be applied to a variety of other situations. In performance, in practice, we train them with Ippon Kumite. It's still a one-step, he attacks, I counter. The goal still is he attacks, I counter, hopefully before his one step becomes 2 or 3 steps. So I'm not gonna backpedal. If I go backpedaling and blocking for a long time, he's eventually going to catch up with me because, as discussed in a previous Seidokan Saturday, forward momentum will overtake backward momentum. To stop that from happening, I yield just enough to create my space, and then I counterattack, ideally before he can follow up or get more attacks in. Okay? So those are the concepts and principles which we use Yakusoku in an Ippon Kumite format to learn these principles. Hopefully that's helpful and you can start to extrapolate the principles of our Yakusoku as you learn them and add on and augment how you follow up or counter the attacks. Thanks for joining another Seidokan Saturday. That's Yakusoku Kumite, and again we'll add more techniques as we progress. Next week we'll discuss the next type of Yakusoku Kumite, which is Goshinjitsu. Goshinjitsu meaning self-defense, random scenario recognition concepts. Thanks for joining again, and we'll see you next week. Until then, keep practicing.